Hi, welcome to the What is Scrum webinar. We're going to talk about Scrum from the developer's perspective, from the Scrum development team member's perspective. You can drop me a line at any time, mj@collab.net. My name is Michael, of course. Here's what I look like, sort of. And some things you should download. These are free things you can download. A 5-page illustrated guide to Scrum. It's been very popular. Also a list of things that Scrum Masters should be thinking about. That's been very popular as well. So a bit more about Scrum. The way you should be doing it. Well, Scrum is a simple framework, but it's hard to do. So think about chess. There's a simple set of rules, but we're still learning how to master the game. It's definitely a better way of working. Among other things, it's a way, if you do it, some of the things that I'm going to talk about today, it's a way of improving the quality of your source code base so that it's more enjoyable to work on and you know where you stand at any given time. Now, this problem of building software, one way of doing it would be just dive in and start coding. And this hasn't worked out so well for a lot of people. It's a way of getting stuff out the door quickly, but quickly we get into this spaghetti code, unmaintainable software. Another way we've tried to do it is with a series of phases. This may look like a Gantt chart to you a little bit. So because we know we need to do other things besides just code. We've got to do some analysis. We've got to do some design work, of course, if we're going to ship the product, or we're going to have to integrate it with something else. We've got to test it. We don't want to deliver an untested product. And eventually we need some way of getting it into the customer's hands, some packaging mechanism, some installer, some way of deploying it. And because we need to do all these things, you might think of doing them in a series of phases like this. The only problem with that is that it doesn't work. It hasn't worked out very well for a lot of complex projects anyway. It's led to this problem of being 90% done for 50% of the time. We get to that point, we check off these milestones, and then we get to one point, maybe we get to test, and that's when we realize, oh, wait a minute, we made a mistake in one of our previous steps. And maybe when we got to coding, we realized, oh, we didn't really finish our design, and we have to change our design. And every large product, every large, sophisticated, complex product has been built in a series of iterations anyway. We wind up doing some amount of all these things for any product, and then a lot of times we wind up redoing it. The idea with Scrum is that we're going to take all these development activities, analysis, design code, implementation, integration, test, deploy, etc., infrastructure, architecture. We're going to take all that stuff and put it in a blender and do some amount of each one every iteration. So if you're doing Scrum properly, then you're doing some combination of design, analysis work, implementation, testing. We'll see how we get testing involved from the very beginning of our product development cycle. So the first sprint involves some amount of testing, and the last sprint involves some amount of design and analysis. And every sprint involves a mix of all these things in varying proportions. If we do Scrum well, we wind up, it looks like this. These iterations, by the way, are short. The original Scrum books were written, we were proposing a 1-month iteration. A lot of teams have figured out that if they're using modern tools and technologies, they can get that iteration down to 2 weeks. And every sprint is the same in this regard. Every sprint, there's no special kind of design sprint, there's no testing sprint. Every sprint has a mix of all these activities happening. Some things that are going to have to change about our organization to support that. First of all, we need a cross-functional development team. If this team is responsible for a potentially shippable product increment every iteration, then we've got to get these guys, hopefully in one room, ideally a mix of skill sets. So we need skills in testing the product, we need skills in architecting and designing the product, we need skills in actual implementation, coding, and we've got to get this into a small group of people. We'll talk about why later on. So we get this small group of people, and we'll call them the Scrum development team. We'll get someone else, and we'll call him or her the product owner. So in Scrum, we have one person is responsible for synthesizing the interests of all these other stakeholders. One person has got to balance those interests or make their own call. and they've got to have the vision behind the product development effort, and they make business decisions. They make decisions about return on investment. And this product owner negotiates with the Scrum development team on a frequent and ongoing basis. At the beginning of each iteration, the product owner is going to negotiate a measurable set of sprint goals. Now, these are goals that are not things that we can do we can get done and measurably done, clearly done, potentially shippable. But we have to learn how to break the work into thin vertical slices so that we can do this kind of work in a 30-day or a 2-week iteration. And how to do that is beyond the scope of this webinar, but it's possible. It's a very interesting problem. Product owner negotiates these goals with the Scrum development team at the sprint planning meeting, and then we protect the team after that. We protect the team from distractions, protect the team from interruptions, protect the team from partial allocation. We've got this team, and they're focused on this difficult but achievable set of sprint goals. And we get them into things we can do to help create a sense of team flow. This is largely the Scrum Master's responsibility. And the team swarms on that work. The team, it's chaos in a box, and the team attempts to build a potentially shippable product increment every 2-week interval, or however long your sprint length is. At that point, the team demonstrates it to the product owner and to other stakeholders. Says, here's what we did, and this demonstration, by the way, is it's actual inspection, the first-hand inspection of the actual product. So it's not a report. It's not a PowerPoint presentation. We want to see the product actually working, up and running at the sprint review meeting. Whatever, let's say product increment. It may not have sufficient scope to be sellable yet, but it is a potentially shippable product, and that means we've done all the necessary testing. Its behavior is deterministic. It may be limited, but we know exactly what it does. It does what it says on the tin, in other words. And then the cycle repeats. Another negotiation with the product owner. Team swarms for another fixed interval, and then the team exposes what they did to the product owner and the other stakeholders. And a lot of times we'll hear, yeah, you guys did what we asked you to, but now that we've seen it, we realize we really wanted something else. Or, yeah, we forgot about this piece. Yeah, you did what we asked you to, but, oh, yeah, what about this? What about that? What about that other thing? And the point is to start finding out about those things as soon as possible. So we want to make maximum visibility at this sprint review meeting so that we can make more intelligent mistakes the next sprint. What makes this work? A small team, and we want clear goals, clear, specific, measurable goals that we can rally around. And we want to do these things in short iterations because we're just not built for long-term goals. We don't do long-term goals very well, but when we can measure our progress towards a short-term goal, now we've got some chance of this maybe something like hyper-productivity, and I don't mean hyper-productivity like you're working your head off. I just mean that compared to the normal baseline expectation at a lot of organizations, it's so much better than what they're used to seeing that it seems like that's where this word hyper-productivity came from. I think it's better to focus on ingenuity. So tools that help us get that time boxing, team binding, meaning the whole team is focused on this clear set of goals. We've got the Scrum Master helping protect us from the wolves, helping us resolve impediments. And we've got most of what we need to build within with the constraints of our own team. So we don't have a lot of external dependencies. Now, we never have perfect conditions for doing this, but if you want to do it really well, the closer you get to these conditions, the better you'll get. The closer you get to the promised results. Here's how we used to look at motivating people. We used to have this view a while ago. Someone named B.F. Skinner discovered that if you put rats in this box and the rats are half starved, and you can elicit simple behaviors from them. If you feed them when they push a lever, and you give them a shock when they do the wrong thing, and you can elicit simple behaviors from animals when you give them punishments and rewards in this manner. That's not the way humans work. It works for simple behaviors. You can elicit simple behaviors this way. But if we're doing complex work, there's a more sophisticated view of human motivation. we really want to tap into people's intrinsic motivation. When we're doing complex work, think about the reason that you got into this field in the first place. There's something intrinsically interesting about this work, and a lot of times the extrinsic motivators are not only ineffective, they're counterproductive. They're actively harmful. And you can read a lot more about this after the webinar if you like. What really motivates people, when they ask people, what's the difference between a good day at work and a bad day? And it comes down to some sense of moving forward, some sense of making progress. Or we can think of that as flow, if you like. And if you're a software developer, I think you already know what I mean when I'm talking about flow. It's the state that you're in when it seems like it takes work to stop working, where it's just effortless. You're absorbed in the work. You're having a peak experience. You're drawn into the work. It just naturally absorbs you, and you're paying attention to it. You're operating at nearly your peak effectiveness, and it doesn't feel like you're working. So, what helps create this state? Well, one of those things is clear goals. We want clear, measurable goals, and we're going to want team goals, not just individual goals. Now we're going to talk about team goals because we're looking for team flow ultimately. Something else that helps create the state of flow is immediate feedback from the activity we're doing. So immediate feedback, and back when I learned to program, but we were still using programs like BASIC, language like BASIC that gives you immediate feedback, and boy, that was fun. And then as it got a little harder, we started using languages where we have to compile it. Now we have to compile it, integrate it with something else, wait a day before it comes back, and it gets less and less interesting. I'm going to show you later on a workflow that brings this immediate feedback back into the way we're working. Also, for flow, ideally, to create the state of flow, we've got difficult goals that we're trying to meet, and we're meeting them with high skills or the appropriate skills for that. So we're taking on challenges that are maybe on the not exactly unachievable, but not exactly easy either. We want to self-regulate the work that we take on, and this is done by volunteering for work. Now, this is a big surprise for a lot of project managers. When we do Scrum, people actually volunteer for their tasks towards those sprint goals. And the Scrum team negotiates their goals with the product owner. We have to hit people with sticks to get them to work, or put little bits of cheese in front of them. If they're interesting, meaningful, achievable goals, then there's something more powerful